Okay, good morning, my dear students. Do you remember what we are talking the previous day? I think you haven't forgotten, and definitely you can remember the topic we are talking about the previous day. An interesting topic we are talking about the previous day. And still, I am continuing this topic because this is a long topic, that is completing sentences. And today we will learn a very interesting part of completing sentences. We will know how to complete sentences with conditionals. Conditional sentences are very important, not only in completing sentences, rather in right form verbs, and even in question number 3, special uses of some English expressions like as if, as though, or if. There are some expressions, special phrases and idioms that are used in question number 3. In question number 3, it is conditional sentences are important. In case of right form verbs, conditional sentences are important, and definitely it's important for completing sentences. Anyway, we will talk about conditional sentences in the sense of completing sentences. Okay, so maybe you are to some extent familiar with the term conditional sentences. Do you have any ideas about conditional sentences? There is no problem if you don't have any ideas, we'll talk about. So, what is a condition, do you know? And the very common term in our everyday, we often use the there is no, I don't like any condition, and sometimes we say, okay, if there is any condition, I will not do this. So, the word condition is often used, a frequently used term in our day-to-day life. So, and also you can guess the meaning of condition. In Bangla it is called shorto. Condition in Bangla is called shorto. For example, if you want to take an exam, what can be the conditions? My dear students will tell us that, sir, we haven't got any classes, so how can you take exams? So taking exams, before taking an exam, we should take classes. So taking classes is a condition for taking exams. So again, if you ask for example, you have a mobile phone like this, and another person has a pen like this, imagine. And if you ask someone, please give me, if someone asks you to give the mobile phone, you can give a condition that, yes, I can give you the mobile phone if you give me the pen. So when one thing is done because another thing will be done. So this is called condition. For example, I am writing a sentence. When do students get good marks? A student can get good marks when a student studies well, attend classes, and be regular in studies. So to get good marks is not easy. To get good marks, you should fulfill some conditions. For example, if I write a sentence, if you study well, you will get good marks. Okay, this is a sentence, Oh, it is. I'm again writing the sentences here. if you study well, you will get good marks. Look at this sentence. This is a sentence and there are two clauses. One is if you study well, the other is you will get good marks. Now imagine getting good marks in the exam is not very easy. So for getting good marks you need to do something, that is you need to study well. So this study well is the condition for getting good marks. It means that in conditional sentences we say there is a condition that if you fulfill this condition, you can achieve the next thing. That is, in one clause, the condition will be given and another clause, the result will be given. That is, if the condition is fulfilled, something will happen. So, one clause will give the condition, the other clause will give the happening. That is, if the condition is fulfilled, something else will happen. And in this example, the condition is studying well and the happening is, that is, the result is getting good marks. So, what is the conditional sentence? In short, we can tell that when a sentence contains a condition and if the condition is fulfilled, something else happens. And this kind of sentences are known as conditional sentences. And normally, in conditional to demonstrate the condition, to show the condition, we use a term, a word, if. So if you find if in a sentence, you have to think that this is a conditional sentence. In most of the cases in conditional sentences, if is written, but in some cases, if can be omitted. We'll talk about later. Primarily think that in a conditional sentence, if is written, but there are some cases in literary form of writing, you can omit if. That is a different case we will talk about later. So, we have understood the characteristics of conditional sentences. But now we will talk about the structure about a conditional sentence. A conditional sentence is definitely a complex sentence. You know, a conditional sentence is definitely a complex sentence, and we also know what a complex sentence is. That is, at least there are two clauses in a complex sentence. Therefore, in a conditional sentence, at least there are two clauses. One is the principal clause and the other is the subordinate clause. Here, take for example this sentence. How many clauses are there? If you study well on clause, you will get good marks, the other clause. That is, at least two clauses are here in this sentence. And if you study well, this is a dependent clause, that is subordinate clause. You will get good marks. The principal clause or the main clause are independent clause. So here, if look at this sentence again, I am telling this is a complex sentence because all conditional sentences are complex sentences. As a complex sentence, as a conditional sentence, it has at least two clauses, and in fact we find here two clauses. The clause that contains if is the dependent clause, and the other clause, the remaining clause, is the principal clause. So again bear in mind, in a conditional sentence, the if clause is the dependent clause or subordinate clause, and the other clause, that is the remaining clause, is the principal clause. Okay. what happens in your examination that one clause will be given, the other clause should be written. That is, you will find either the principal clause. If the principal clause is given, you have to write the subordinate clause. If the subordinate clause is given, you have to write the principal clause. That is the normal process of question pattern. And one very important thing is that we have found here two clauses. If you study well the subordinate clause, you will get good marks the principal clause. So here in this sentence, subordinate clause is written at first, then the principal clause is written. But this position can be reversed. That is, always it is not mandatory to write the subordinate clause, that is if clause at the beginning and the principal clause at the end of the sentence. But you can change the position of these two clauses. For example, you can write, you will get good marks if you study well. Okay, look at this sentence. Here the principal clause has been written at the beginning of the sentence, and the subordinate clause has been written in the end. So there is no problem regarding their meanings, but there is one difference. That is, when you write the subordinate clause later and you write the principal clause in the beginning, what happens that, look at the first sentence. Between the principal clause and the subordinate clause, we have given a comma. But when you write the principal clause at the beginning of the sentence and the subordinate clause at the end of the sentence, between the principal clause and subordinate clause, you should not put a comma. That is the basic difference of the position, reverse position. There is no difference regarding their meanings, there is no lexical difference, but structurally, in case of punctuation marks, we just put a comma when we write the subordinate clause at the beginning of the sentence. Therefore, that is the conjunction here, if functions as a conjunction, as if functions as a subordinating conjunction, you should not give a comma here. The if is enough. Okay. Now the question is, in traditional grammar books, you will find different kinds of conditional sentences. What are the different kinds of conditional sentences? That is, what are the classes of conditional sentences we should bear in mind? Even in class 9 and 10, you may have learned different kinds of conditionals. For example, definitely you have heard first conditional sentences, second conditional sentences, and third conditional sentences. Beyond these three kinds of conditional sentences, there is one more conditional sentence, that is zero conditional sentence. So primarily we can say that there are three kinds of conditional sentences. There are first conditional sentences, second conditional sentences, and third conditional sentences. But there is one more conditional sentence, and that is called zero conditional sentence. So we will talk about these four kinds of conditional sentences. Zero conditional, first conditional, second conditional, third conditional. So I like to repeat. Primarily in traditional books you will find three kinds of conditionals: first conditional, second conditional, third conditional. But there is one more conditional, that is called zero conditional. And these four conditionals again can be divided to broad kinds, that is, these two conditional sentences are also called real conditional, and these two conditional sentences are called unreal. And again it has another name, that is possible, possible and impossible. So first two kinds, that is zero conditional and first conditional, are often called real conditional sentences or possible conditional sentences, and the other two kinds, that is second conditional and third conditional sentences, are often called unreal or impossible conditional sentences. So perhaps you have at least understood different kinds of conditionals and what a conditional sentence is, and how a conditional sentence, that is components of a conditional sentence, that is at least two kinds of clauses are used in a conditional sentence, and they are principal clause and the subordinate clause. And up to this today, next day we will talk about different kinds of conditional sentences and how different kinds of conditional sentences are written, and how different tenses, different kinds of tenses are used in different kinds of conditional sentences. Thank you very much. Hope to meet you again